Are your pan watercolors running out? Would you like to refill them with tube watercolors instead of buying new pans? Keep watching. Hi there! So I've had this half pan Cotman Winsor & Newton watercolor set for about 10 years, I think, and I've never replaced any of the pans, but the alizarin crimson hue and cadmium yellow pale hue are pretty much gone now. I remember I was looking for pan refills at brick and mortar art stores years ago already when they were running low, and the individual pans were just so expensive I didn't end up buying them. And I think I would have had to buy full pans and cut them in half. Checking online now, it looks like there are half pans available, but one pan would cost me around €3, so refilling two colors would be around €6, which I think is kind of expensive. The cost of this set originally was maybe about €20 at the time I bought it. So I don't have the correct refills. However, I do have the tube watercolors Home Hobby by 3L sent me for a review video. The paints cost around €7 for 12 of 12 ml tubes, so they're a lot more affordable than the pan refills. Of course, I can use both watercolor sets together, but especially when traveling, it would be nice to have all the colors I need in this one palette. So, instead of refill pans, I'll try filling them with similar colors from the tube watercolor set I have. You can lift up the tray thing of the Cotman Pocket Set palette and then get the pans out by pushing from the backside. The two sets don't have the exact same colors, but the ones I'm using here are lemon yellow and crimson red. I didn't wash off the remainders of the watercolor cakes, but I did wipe the pans a bit to hopefully get off any dust. So I'll squeeze the paint into the sides first to try and get the paint in the corners of the pan, and I'm not filling them all the way because apparently they're going to crack and I'll need to add more paint later anyway. I'm using the end of a cotton swab but without the cotton to push the paint into the corners to try and fill the pan more evenly. A toothpick was suggested for this, but I don't have wooden toothpicks, so I thought this would work too. And since I changed the colors, I'm going to mark down the current colors in the pans. One side is already used for the previous color, so I'll write on the opposite side with a permanent marker both the color and the brand name after wiping it clean. And when I place the pans back into the palette, I make sure to position them so that the names are visible. You can put the pans back in by pushing them down. Now I'm letting the pans dry. I closed the lid, but not all the way. I left a small crack so the tube watercolors can dry, but they're not catching dust or being left in sunlight. Apparently that can harm the paints, which I didn't know. Usually I leave the palette completely open for like a day after using the paints so they can dry off, but I'll stop doing that from now on. The next morning the pans are still a bit sticky, so not yet completely dry, but you can already see some cracks forming. The crimson red looks a bit more evenly distributed than the lemon yellow. Let's let them dry a bit more. This is how they look the day after that. You can fill in the gaps and make the pans look a bit nicer with a second layer of paint later. I've understood that not all tube watercolors will work well in pans. Some might not dry at all, especially if you live in a warm climate, and they might end up messing up your palette when you're carrying it in your bag. And on the other hand, some might dry very hard and be difficult to reactivate with water. I'll link to an article I found about this, so you can read more about which tube watercolors will work the best. I'm swatching these about 2 weeks after refilling them, and they do dry hard, and they're cracking easily, but they still reactivate with water just fine. So I think this was a success. I don't know, however, how this will affect the light fastness, meaning how fast the pigments will fade when exposed to light, or even what the light fastness of these tube paints was to begin with, since I didn't find a light fastness rating for them. If you'd like to know more about the pros and cons of tube and pan watercolors, click on the video on the screen. Thanks for watching.